So, welcome everybody to this virtual event, Ask Me Anything, lessons from 100 plus CFOs on scaling finance, the good, the bad, and everything in between. My name is Luke. I am the head of community for CFO Connect, and I recognize quite a few names in the audience. So, it's hello to you all. Nice to see you. Just to kick things off before we get started, I would love to hear from the audience. How has your recent experience scaling finance been? Has it been a positive or a negative experience? So all I ask you to do is drop a thumbs up or a thumbs down in the chat to let us know how has your experience been scaling finance wherever you are. And so while you do that, a quick intro. So CFO Connect, for those of you who might not know, is a private community of 12,000 finance leaders. And we are hosting today's webinar. And we host events like these on a regular basis, produce regular reports and articles. We have a private Slack group, and the overall mission of the community is to help our members be better at their jobs in the finance industry. This webinar is also in partnership with our friends from Subscript. And so we do have Phil and Olivia here that will also help guide us through the discussion. So I'll pass it over to Phil for a quick intro and Olivia as well.
Hey everyone, it's nice to virtually meet you all. My name's Phil. I'm on the team here at Subscript. First, I'll give you a little bit about Subscript, and I'll give you a short intro, and I promise the Subscript stuff will be really short. Overall, we're software that helps B2B SaaS finance leaders automate their invoicing, rev rec, analytics, chase down late payments, that sort of stuff. I'm never going to talk about Subscript again in this presentation because that's not what it's about. Instead, I'm excited to talk to you all today because in my day-to-day, I'm very, very lucky. And I just get to talk to finance leaders literally multiple times a day. Yesterday, I had 4 great conversations with finance leaders, which is kind of interesting because in my career, I'm generally a marketer by trade. And I can probably think of maybe 1 or 2 marketers where I've genuinely sat down with them in the past year and picked their brain and talked to them about scaling and their challenges and that sort of stuff. But because of my role, I'm lucky that I just get to talk with really smart finance leaders all day, every day. And so in our discussion today, anything smart that I say, I get 0 credit for. It's all just stuff that I've learned and heard from other finance people. And that's what I want to bring to you all today. One of those smart finance people that I've been happy enough to connect with in my career is Olivia, our other speaker. So Olivia, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. Thank you for joining us today. And out in the audience, I see a few folks that I haven't spoken to in a few years. So if you are one of those people, I want you to reach out to me after this so we can catch up. But it's great to be here. Thank you, Phil, for the introduction. I don't think you're doing yourself justice because I have to say some of the conversations that you and I have had, Phil, about scaling finance and systems and the CFO role in general have been some of the most enlightening that I've had. So I'm super happy to be here. Really happy to be a part of the conversation. As for myself, I am currently the CFO of a company called Promise. We are a government technology company that specializes in working with US government agencies. We do proactive outreach, technology-driven enrollment processes, streamlined customer interactions, basically any ways in which the people interact with the government in either sending in money or receiving money. Our technology helps with that. In my career, my first career was on Wall Street. And so that really made me understand that there's a different set of systems that are needed for companies going through hypergrowth versus companies that are at a stable scaled level. And I'm happy to dive into that a little bit more in the course of this discussion. On the startup side, I have done 5 startups now. I've been lucky to go through hypergrowth with 3. There was one in particular where, it was an asset management startup and we raised something like $16 billion over 5 years. So it's been I've had a lot of different experiences in the startup world and so have a number of opinions about how to scale finance in the space. Back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Phil. You have both really set the stage. So very, very excited for this conversation. Before I turn it over to you both, a few reminders. This isn't Ask Me Anything, right? I think Phil and Olivia are here to answer your questions. So please, let's make it as interactive as possible. You can ask questions in the Q&A tab. And also upvote your favorite questions so that Phil and Olivia know which ones are the most pressing. And secondly, this is recorded. So we will send you a recording via email after this session, so you can also rewatch it on your own. So with that, I'm going to pop off screen and I'll hand the mic over to Phil and Olivia to walk you through scaling finance.
Cool. Thanks, Liv.
All right.
All right. Olivia, I don't know if you and I chatted about this, but we have a list of questions in front of us, audience members. This is the secret behind the scenes. But all of these questions came from audience members already. So I know that there was polling of the audience before we even joined. We have a long list of questions ahead of us that Olivia will guide us through discussing, and hopefully we can get through the ones that are most important to everyone here.
Okay. Awesome. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll get to them at some point in this conversation. Let's kick it off. So Phil, as we talked about, you've spoken with a ton of CFOs, more than 100. What's the biggest theme that you're hearing from them right now?
Yeah, there are a few things that bubble up in like nearly every conversation that I'm having. And I hope, if nothing else, when the audience hears this, that they could just like nod their heads and know that they're not alone. Because I feel like when I have these conversations with folks, they always like whisper it to me as if they're the only one that is facing this problem. Part of the joy in my job is being like, no, it's like, I heard this 5 times today. It's okay. You're not alone. It's just a big challenge. The 4 buckets that I probably put it into, maybe the first one I'll start with, it's just that everyone, maybe I can't say everyone, 9 out of 10 people think that their data is an absolute hot mess. They might be right. Maybe sometimes I feel like they are, sometimes they're not. But there is a bar of just like data is messy that is across all finance orgs that I see. And so then, of course, the challenge becomes, how do you operate in a world where data is going to be messy? And how do you think about doing what you can to make it less messy? But that's something that comes up. And that's one where everyone is always surprised that, oh, other orgs have a CRM that's not perfect, and other orgs have data in multiple different places. That comes up all the time. Also now, and this is a change, I've been working with finance leaders for like the last 4 years. And obviously the big thing that's come up recently is all around AI. And I think there are questions later today where we'll go into that in more detail. But the main thing that I'm hearing and feeling now is just a lot of curiosity, but more than anything, like skepticism around AI. So I wonder if that matches what our audience here feels today. I don't talk to a lot of people that will tell me like AI is changing my life and it's making everything so much better. And it's given me 40 hours back every month or something like that. It's more of like, this is interesting. It might be snake oil. What's going on here? Like those sorts of conversations. And then probably the last thing is that finance teams are really looking for ways to automate things and become more efficient. Maybe that is partially related to the AI stuff or just the world that we're in right now. But there's a lot of small and mighty finance teams who are doing a ton with very little resources, working hard to get their work prioritized and that sort of stuff. It's not, a lot of my conversations are not, wow, I'm swimming in resources. This is so easy. Let me just kick my feet up. It's a lot of like, man, there's a lot to do in little time. And what can we do to make it better for our team? Does that match what you're saying, Olivia?
Oh, absolutely. I think the one that's top of mind for me is really that finance teams are doing a lot. They're doing a lot, especially nowadays with this greater focus on profitability that a lot of companies are experiencing. Teams are running leaner at the same time when insights are really expected to be more real time, and where we as finance leaders and our teams are expected to contribute even more to the business. So I think everything that you said really touches on the key things that I'm seeing in the industry. And I think it's such great framing, right? Like the automation, the data, doing more with less. It sounds like finance teams are just really evolving quickly, which actually kind of brings me to our next question. So what patterns have you noticed in how finance teams evolve as companies grow?
Oh yeah, I'll give my answer, and then Olivia, I'm like very excited to hear your answer, of course, based on your intro. But the overall theme that I see is there's early stage folks that I'll talk to. Generally, there's like one smart generalist being asked to do everything across the board in finance. They're duct taping things together. They're relying on outsourced contractors, bookkeepers, that sort of stuff. The backgrounds of those people are also really interesting. Sometimes they can be from finance. Oftentimes they have no finance background. Oftentimes they have more of an ops background and that sort of stuff. And then they eventually transition into finance. So at the early stage, you see a lot of stuff, but the overall theme is 1 or 2 people doing what they can to guide the business and keep it going forward. And then The next stage that I'd consider is like the growth stage. And that's where things get very crazy. And I'm sure that the folks in the audience have like seen this. Generally, you get to a point where, knock on wood, and hopefully the company is growing so fast that the amount of data flowing through all of the systems just becomes more than a small finance team can handle. And as that data grows, it also grows in its complexity and the number of exceptions increases. So it's not just like one beautiful data set that has now become 100 and it's easy to automate. It's like, man, the salespeople are closing crazier and crazier deals. We're making exception after exception, breaking down our systems. Everything is hard. We need to hire in finance, but who do we hire? Oh no, we made the wrong hire. It's like all of that craziness generally happens then. And then the last stage that I'd describe is kind of like the post scale stage. Sometimes that is still crazy if we're being honest, but when all things are going well, that's the stage where kind of the systems are in place. They're making everything more smooth, and finance can truly start to get away from putting out fires and dealing with data and that sort of stuff and move toward what you mentioned, Olivia, of like generating insights and really guiding the business. But you have lived it in ways that I have not lived this. So curious to get your take too.
I've scaled a number of finance teams, and my personal background is I came from the strategic finance side. I was on Wall Street. I worked in capital markets, and when I got into the CFO seat, I began to recognize how crucial the accounting function is and how powerful a truly integrated relationship between strategic finance and accounting could be. Because on the strategic finance side, if you're not getting great numbers and having a partner on the accounting side who actually understands what it is like to take those numbers and model out into the future with that data, your model is really only as good as its inputs,
Yeah.
right? So really, I've seen firsthand how powerful it can be when a CFO is able to fully harness the strength of a high performance accounting team. So, for example, at a large fintech that I was previously at, it's now a publicly traded company. The accounting team played a key role in capital markets and loan sales. They were the ones who truly understood the accounting impact of securitization structures and the technical side of the numbers. And in fact, one of the accountants there actually went on to lead FP&A for this very large company. And at another SaaS company that I was at, the accounting team, not only handled daily cash reconciliations, because let's be honest, financial operations, processes, and data is very important. And on top of the close and everything else that they did, because they spent so much time with the numbers, they were actually the best ones to take on FP&A functions like budgeting, like forecasting. And so in both of these cases, the accounting teams were able to expand their impact because they'd automated and streamlined a lot of their day-to-day processes, right? They had their rev rec, their deferred revenue schedules down to a science, and, not having to require a whole lot of manual work because they had the right system, they had the right foundational layers. And so I've just seen that these teams can be super valuable to their businesses. And frankly, unfortunately, in cases where teams did not stand up the integrated automations to help manage their day-to-day, they just weren't able to have that same level of impact.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So a ton of evolution in this space, right? Like the shift from like producing numbers to producing insight. This is something that we've all thought about and talked about a lot. Of course, scaling isn't always smooth sailing. So yeah, maybe we can chat a little bit about the realities of what makes scaling finance harder than expected, which leads us to our next question. What have you heard on this front? What do CFOs tend to underestimate about scaling finance?
Yeah, there's a few things, and it's so hard because I'm in really everything about scaling finance. It's just hard. But I think the things that people are maybe surprised by to a certain extent is there's like a genuine, very real cost of delay that you were just talking about, Olivia. Most finance leaders that I know, they have this desire to do as much as they can with as few resources as possible for as long as possible. I think it's like, it must be built into finance team DNA. But you get to a point where like things become really hard. There's a point where like you do that for too long, and then that makes things very, very, very hard. The sooner that you can put formalized processes into place, sometimes this could be solved by software. Sometimes it could just be solved by the folks that you hire or the processes that you put in place. But I talk with people all day, every day who are just like, I should have done this last year. Like, I just wish I would have done this earlier. And that they're talking about can always change, but like that conversation is happening weekly for me. I can't go a week without it. The other thing that comes up a lot is just like the emotional load of doing this, especially in the early days. Like, being a finance leader means that you're saying no a lot, and ultimately you have to make a lot of very tough decisions. And it's a tough emotional thing to go through that. And then the third that I'd add is just like on the people front, it's really hard to hire great people unless that ends up being a superpower of yours. But most of the people that I talk about, it's hard to know what role to hire for. It's hard to know what background to look for. Then it's hard to interview for that. And it's hard to onboard that person. This could probably go across any leadership role in a startup, but I feel like it's more pronounced in finance because in the earlier days, their teams are smaller. So one wrong hire can make a really bad impact, and one great hire can make a outsized good impact. So I think those are the three things that come up most often for the conversations that I'm having.
I think you're right. Hiring can be very difficult. It's one of the keys to success. And I think that it's that plus what I have seen as I have stepped into CFO roles is you're given a window of time at the beginning, right? And that window of time, what you really want to do is invest that energy into setting up that foundational layer of systems investments, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Excel sheets that are automated because you have templates, or you invest in a few systems that are going to be core to how you operate as a finance and accounting function. But when you sacrifice that energy in making that initial investment to make data good from the start, that has waterfall effects that cascade throughout, the next 12, 24, 36 months. And if you don't do it at the beginning, it becomes really hard to pause long enough later on to then stop and say, oh, let's change up what we're doing and invest now the time and energy to doing it a different way. And thinking about scaling finance, I think one of the key things that I have seen is people who have done it before understand the importance of making these investments earlier on. And that saves you a lot of pain later on in the process.
That is 100% what I hear too, Olivia. That's great. I can't believe I left that part out. That when I talk to folks who have done it before, well, obviously here at Subscript, I sell software that theoretically helps automate some stuff. So generally when I have a conversation with someone who has been CFO 2 or 3 times before, they're like, Phil, I know I need this. You don't need to convince me I need this. How much does it cost? What's the deal? And we get right to it, which is a vibe very different than folks who are doing it for the first time.
That's right, because those delays will come back to haunt you later.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so specifically, what do you think are the most common mistakes that companies make when they're scaling their finance function?
Yeah, it's a lot of what we talked about already, where they can let exceptions stay exceptions for too long, or like waiting too long to operationalize things and not. I think what you said is perfect, Olivia. Actually, like if you take on a new job, one of your first initiatives should be ripping the Band-Aid off and getting a lot of these systems changes in place if you can. Maybe in this might be against that first point, but I don't mean it in this way. But like you can't expect tooling in and of itself to save the day. I'll talk with folks who somewhat have that feeling like as soon as I get this FP&A tool in, life will be so much better. Or as soon as I can get this other tool in, life will be so much better. And maybe, but often it's like the underlying stuff that we've been talking about already. Like there are underlying processes and just like ways of working and data cleanliness. And there are all these things that need to be fixed really before a tool can come in and save the day or get you where you need to go. So that's another thing that I see. And then we've talked a lot about hiring, but certainly like hiring the wrong role or the wrong person comes up all the time. We can talk about this in more detail later if it's helpful for people. But the big thing that I see is folks are generally trying to hire someone who is not like them. So if they come from an accounting background as CFO, they're generally looking to make one of their first hires someone with a more strategic FP&A background, or it could be the opposite way. And then when you do that, it's hard to know what great looks like in that other role because you've been for so long on the other side of the house. And so I see a lot of people have a lot of unease around like what to look for, why to look for it, how to evaluate it. And I hear more times than I would like of like folks who have made wrong hires because of that.
I would agree with that. And I mean, again, I think that comes back to maybe the experience thing sometimes, because then you would have seen what things look like on both sides.
Yep.
And that cuts down on the number of of attempts that you have to try. And another thing that I've noticed too, I worked in Series A companies all the way up to Series G and, publicly traded companies. And, I think one of the main things that I see, going back to your point about exceptions, is that experienced leaders have a way of harnessing the process used for exceptions so that there aren't that many exceptions,
Yeah.
right? Because the approach is then, oh, I've seen that before. I know when it's an exception, when it's not an exception, or when we actually need to build it as a non-exception into the system. Because the way that you scale is you have to create a system that relies on dependable, reliable, repeatable inputs and outputs. And that's one thing that I think systems are really great for, because even though it starts with clean data, right? But then in implementing the system, you're you're putting on yourself that discipline to say, okay, this is our framework. This is how we're going to work. These are the categories that we're going to consider in our data. And this is how we're going to look at our world. And that itself puts a discipline into the organization of saying, okay, well, this is our framework. This is how we're going to look at things. And every time there's an exception, we have to find a way to make it part of the framework. So I think that in itself is really helpful as a company scales.
Shit. That reminds me of something else that I'm curious to get your take on. Olivia, going off script here to put you on the spot. That's another one of the things that I see maybe folks that are doing it for the first time have a difference from folks that have not. I will often see folks who are doing this for the first time. They can rush that part that you were just talking about. Like they really I need to get a system to handle exceptions in place in the next 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. And then on the more experienced side, you realize that is one of the most important foundational things that you can do. And it's going to take time. Obviously you want to go fast because everything should go fast, but that's one of those things where you really want to get it right. I'm curious, feel free to disagree with me. Is that what you have seen too? And that the importance of getting that set up and taking the time to do it right early on?
Oh, absolutely. Because businesses thrive on repeatable processes,
Yeah.
right? That is when you establish repeatable processes that you can then write SOPs around and,
Yep.
hire people or bring in systems to do that repeatable process is when you can really scale, right? That is when
Yeah.
you can get either the headcount savings, or you can go more aggressive in hiring for a higher tier, or like a more senior person, without having to spend time doing the very manual day-to-day managing all these exceptions, right?
Yeah.
Because those it's death by 1,000 cuts.
Yes, it is.
Right? I'm sure we've all experienced that. And the sooner you tackle that and say, nope, this is how we're going to look at the world, and actually make how you look at the world the right way to look at the world, that's, I think, where the experience comes in. The better off your team and the company will be better for it in the future.
Yeah. Awesome. Totally agree.
Yeah. So no to temporary fixes to the
Yes.
because they become permanent pain points. That is the
Yes.
middle of that. So going on to our next question, right? Once companies realize that they need to tighten up some of these temporary fixes, how do you actually balance control and growth? What have you seen? How do you do that without slowing everyone down?
Yeah. This is more of maybe a zoomed out perspective. I feel like the folks that do this really well, ultimately what it comes down to is they're just very good at communicating, and they're very good at proactively communicating. And I think it's understanding what the trade-offs are and then being able to socialize that with folks. It's yes, here's what we can do. We need to move speed. We need to move quickly. We need to move with a lot of speed. But because of that, here are what the trade-offs are going to be. Are we okay with those trade-offs? There's going to be a through line here of communication through our last set of questions, because that tends to be the main thing that I see from CFOs who are truly kicking butt versus those that are maybe struggling a little bit more, is the skill of communication probably goes overlooked. And it's really important, especially as the company is growing and you need to say no to a bunch of stuff. It needs to be well communicated with rational arguments, probably documented so other folks can see it, probably well socialized through the leadership team. Those are the sorts of things that I'm hearing and seeing.
I think communication is so key in this respect. And I would add maybe just one thing to that, which is once you have a view on risk, it's very important to communicate that. But I'm going to take one step back and talk about risk mapping. So I am a very revenue focused CFO coming from the strategic finance world. Revenue is my love language. I was closing a deal the other day, and it's so in balancing this growth and control, I'm really wearing dual hats, right? I have my protect the company at all costs, and protect our war chest, protect the capital, protect the growth trajectory, protect resource allocation and making the right decision, and driving growth, right? Those are two different things. And so in order to do both well, I have to know that I have a very clear understanding of risk in the company, right? And each company is going to have a different risk map. In a lending business, it might be treasury management, it might be liquidity, it might be warehouse reporting, right? You don't want to lose access to your credit line. In a payments business, it could be financial operations, it could be controls around your financial operations. For a SaaS company, it could be pricing. You don't want your sales team going rogue and offering, right, Bill? And offering pricing that, puts you in the red when it comes to your unit economics. So as a CFO, I sleep better at night having taken a diligent approach to mapping out the risks in the organization and putting the appropriate controls around the areas of the key risks that I see so that I can focus on growth.
Yeah.
And so all of that kind of then feeds in the communication, right? Which is what you were talking about, and making sure that everybody is aligned on those risks and that they're aware of, okay, well, these are the controls that are protecting us on the really important things so that we can then go focus on pushing and driving the business forward.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. I know it's come up a lot in our conversation so far, but let's talk about systems and automation, which is something that I'm super passionate about, since that's where a lot of CFOs are investing time and budget right now. And you've talked to a lot of CFOs about their tool stacks and what's actually working and what's creating challenges.
Yeah, that's a good question. And also, I guess before I answer this, because I have now just looked at the clock and audience, we'll probably move to like Q&A at some point soon. So while Olivia and I are talking and answering this last question, if there are things that you really want us to dive into, it could be as specific as answer this very specific question, Olivia and Phil, or it could just be like, you guys haven't talked about X topic yet. Drop that in either the chat or the Q&A, and then we'll look at it after this one. But when it comes to tool stacks and automation, what's working, what's creating new challenges, I guess I can talk at a high level, and then maybe we can get more in the weeds without like name dropping any specific tools or anything. But I feel like what's creating new challenges is all the stuff that we've already been talking about, Olivia. It's like, there's not a magical tool that is like magically going to fix all of your problems. It doesn't happen. The problems tend to be when you start to stack tools on top of a foundation that is shaky. And that's going to cause like more problems than it solves. I see that all day, every day with like implementations that have gone wrong or things that have been done perhaps too quickly. What is working, I guess, is the opposite side of that. It's like having a very clear plan and knowing exactly what you want to solve, what you need to solve it, have the resources lined up, have the right expectations from your side about what this is going to take to be successful, and go about it that way. I think that's like the zoomed out view on the tooling side that goes across like all of the tools that I talk with folks on. To get, I guess, more specific about what's actually working and what's creating new challenges, or maybe that's not even worth getting into. I think in all of the tools that folks are using, maybe this is the helpful insight. I talk with people about a lot of tools, a lot of specific tools that I will not say today. And in all of those tools, like in any given week, I'll hear from 2 people that absolutely hate it and 2 people that absolutely love it. It's just like, it's crazy. And it happens with every tool across every space. And so that's what leads me back to these like broader points. I don't think that there is like a tool or a set of tools that is inherently bad or maybe even inherently good. It's more of like, what is the right tool for your business? And have you done the right stuff to make the tool successful? Is the tool solving the best next problem to be solved? And those sorts of things are ultimately what comes up.
I would agree with that. I also want to just give credit to the period that we find ourselves in right now. There is so much innovation going on within the CFO tech stack, right? I'm just happy that we're there at all. And so I feel like part of the challenge of CFOs thinking about their tool stacks and automation is staying on top of all of these solutions, right? There are so many companies that are coming out with promising solutions, and that in and of itself is already a challenge. I find that talking to other CFO peers about what they like, what they don't like really helps. And I just like to stay on top of it and see what's out there, because I think in comparing different tools and getting familiar with what tools offer what, you'll organically get to the answer of, well, what might work for me, right? And like
Yep.
let's dive deeper into that tool and understand how it really works.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. How do you change systems from legacy or starter tools to more flexible systems as you grow, given how heavy these transitions can be?
Are you okay if we go rogue, Olivia? Can we talk about a completely unrelated to all of this stuff question? Are we brave enough to
Please.
do this?
Love
Well,
it.
we do have the questions from the audience, which I know that like you're gonna have great answers to some, but I'll let those continue to build. I have been like dying to talk about AI stuff because these days, like that's probably the biggest thing that's actually coming up in conversations with me and finance leaders. And then we had like question 8 on the list, which was like, what are the top AI tools or use cases CFOs are exploring now? Are you okay if we pivot to that one?
Let's do it. Top of mind for me as well.
Okay. Yeah, I figured. And this is like, I have to control myself because I could really go on a 20-minute rant on this topic, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. And instead, I'll just share like the overall experience that I'm hearing from folks and how they're using it. The main thing that I'll share is that I don't know of a killer AI tool for finance yet. I know of a lot of companies that say they have the killer AI tool for finance, but I talk I talk with enough finance leaders that if there was such a tool, I would know about it and I would tell you all right now. Such a tool does not exist yet. I never have anyone who says like this tool is life changing. You have to check it out, recommend it to other people. It's always like at best, I saw that, I tried that. It's fine. It's not ready yet. Like that sort of stuff is what I'm hearing. Finance leaders are keeping a close eye on it. Like you just mentioned, Olivia, I feel like they're taking lots of demos. They're interested in the space. They're trying to keep up with it. A lot of times there's mandates from the CEO or the board or company level stuff to like make sure we're on top of the AI stuff, but it still does feel very early. The biggest stuff that I see folks actually using, I would consider as like relatively straightforward, pretty easy use cases of like using Chat GPT for stuff or using AI in ways that can help spreadsheets or help analyze data. But even that, honestly, that's like 1 out of 20 people I talk with are probably doing stuff like that. I think there's a lot of stuff that AI can do. I'm very, very excited for what it can do for finance. But being very transparent, I do believe that there's a lot of like snake oil sales going on right now and a lot of stuff that probably looks really cool. And in practice, the reviews that I hear from CFOs is like not ready yet. But now I'm very curious from you, Olivia. You now have the opportunity to be like, Phil, let me tell you about the killer AI tool for finance that you have not discovered yet, but I suspect that you haven't found it either.
Oh man, I wish that was the case.
I know, wouldn't it be awesome?
It would be amazing. Where I see a lot of AI being used in finance is really around, for example, policies. If you have I didn't mean to give that. If you have, for example, complex ASC 606, this is in the US GAAP world, of
Yep.
like revenue recognition policies and memos that you do, AI is great at taking a first stab at analyzing those things. I would say another area where AI is really helpful, or has been really helpful, has been, some of the tools out there now allow AI to read through your customer contracts and your vendor
Mm,
contracts so that it
yep.
pulls out key terms for you, so that your team is not manually going through these for the first time and notating in your central source of truth, like your vendor terms or your customer contract terms. So that's been really helpful. But that's really been the extent of it. On the financial modeling front, or even, I mean, I want to say for some companies, usually on the smaller end, there are tools out there that can help with closing the books.
Mhm.
If you don't have a lot of complexity in your, balance sheet accounts, or, your amortization schedules, like especially if you're on cash accounting, then there are tools out there that can be super helpful towards a month end close. But that's kind of where I see the tools ending right now. I'm hopeful that at some point in the future, I'll be able to plug in my chat GPT prompt into a financial model builder and have it
That would be awesome.
have it send me back a fully length 3-statement model with all the correct drivers. Oh, that is the dream.
Yeah.
In case that there are any entrepreneurs out here.
I've heard there are countless entrepreneurs working on exactly that right now, Olivia.
And I would be happy to look at all of them because
Yeah.
the day that somebody can build a software that does that, then that would be amazing. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, nothing that has been groundbreaking in the finance and accounting specific workflows so far. However, I think even with just ChatGPT or the AI add-on, it's been groundbreaking for
Yeah.
a lot of the normal things that we have to handle as finance and accounting folks. So I would just say, I would urge folks to don't give up. Make sure you
Yeah,
stay on
agreed.
top of these things. Make sure you keep trying to incorporate AI into your processes because it matters and it's going to matter even more in the future.
Agreed. 100%. We have about 5 minutes left, I think, Olivia. And so I was looking at Q&A and there's one that has a ton of upvotes and that I think that you are going to be especially in a great spot to answer. It's around CFO, CEO leadership relations during scaling. I mentioned this because the audience won't know this, but before we went live, Olivia's CEO ran into the room that she's in now. So Olivia was like, I want a webinar. And then your CEO was like, Olivia is awesome. She's so great. And then left the room. So you must be doing something right. So are there any CFO, CEO leadership lessons that you can share with the team?
You know what? I think, yes, I have a few things I'd like to share, which is one, it starts with picking the right CEO. This has to be a person that you want to build with, who wants to hear what you have to say, whose values are aligned with yours. And so some of the most successful partnerships I've had with CEOs, all of them are where I act as an advisor to them. I am usually the other person in the company that has that super clear view on where is the company now, where could we go, and how do we get from where we are now to where we could go. I have to have a view on that. And you as a CFO has to have a view on that. And it could be different than a CEO's. It could be the same, but you have to have a view in order to be effective in your role, right? And everything stems from that. Sometimes I'm more hands-on, sometimes I'm more hands-off when it comes to that CEO-CFO relationship, depending on what the CEO needs, right? If they're focused on a super technical growth period for the company and they're working, mostly on product and, things like that, I tend to be hands-off. I let them do whatever they're focused on if it's getting us to where we need to go. Where I get involved is when major decisions are getting made or we are aligning on what the North Star goals are for the company. Those are some of the best conversations that we have. And then, of course, like the day-to-day execution of, where are we relative to our North Star goals? How do we get there? Are we going off track? Are we, making the best decisions possible? Those are the things that I think lead to a really strong CEO-CFO relationship.
Totally agree. Olivia, I'm just now peppering you with questions. I'm throwing my opinion out the window because there's another one that I want to ask you that has come up and gotten a lot of votes in chat. I have a take on it too, but I would love to start with yours. It's like Monica is asking that. I think it's the ROI on the finance automation and AI is usually not attractive for leadership. So they're wondering about our experience and like, how do you get it away from a simple dollar calculation to prove that it's worth buying some of these tools? This is like, as someone who sells this tool like this, I obviously like this is a conversation that comes up all the time for me and I have a view on it, but curious to start with yours if something comes to mind for you, Olivia.
Yeah. So I think the answer to that actually goes back to how finance is integrated into the business, right? As you think about the different phases of growth that finance and accounting as a function within a company goes through, as Phil, as you mentioned, it goes from generalist to grow to fully like integrated. If as a CFO, you're able to pull that integration of the business with finance into the business forward into even the earlier stages of growth, then the business recognizes right away how impactful finance is. And really, that is when finance operates at its best, whether you're in a Series A company or a Series C or publicly traded company, right? You want to be that team in the company that has clarity about the roadmap, that can sign off on, well, these are the right decisions to make. This is how we should think about decision. And once you establish that role, which is super powerful, then what systems you use to get there then becomes a secondary discussion.
Yeah, that's really smart. That's a great way to approach it. Additional things that I think come up for me, and of course, curious to get your take on this too, Olivia, are like, I think there are some things that are really important to track ROI on software purchases. And there are other things that are more like foundational. And even thinking about trying to measure the ROI in a specific way is probably just the wrong way to approach it. At least this is the viewpoint that I've gotten really from lots of finance leaders at roundtables that you and I have both been to, Olivia. I doubt most CEOs are being like, no, we can't get a CRM until you prove to me the ROI. It's like, no, like you obviously you need this. Like you just pay these vendors whatever they ask and you get bids against one another, but like it's a tool that you need. Same with like probably QuickBooks, right? Or QuickBooks Zero, Datev, whatever tool that you're using out there. It's like, there are these tools that you just need. And so part of it could be making sure you're positioning these things in the right way as you're talking about your requests. And I think that comes back to what you were saying, Olivia, right? Of having a plan and laying out that plan. And then once you have buy-in on the plan, I think it'll become clear that there are probably some things that you need to make it happen. And of course, it's about getting the best price, but like you need these things. And then there are probably going to be other things that are like nice to haves. And maybe you think about them in the future. If you get a great deal, maybe you take it. And if not, you don't have to worry about it. Does that resonate with what you've seen too, Olivia?
Yes, very much so. I think part of the reason why a CEO or a board hires you specifically to sit in the CFO seat is because you come with a set of experiences. You come with an understanding of best practices for this area of the company that you're going to oversee, right? What finance and accounting. And I think it's very important for folks in this role to come to the table with an opinion about what that best practice is day one or even before day one, as you talk about what your role is going to look like. Well, part of the role is that you are going to put in place the best practices and the best systems for this stage of growth so that the company can scale and run and perform along the roadmap that you have aligned with the CEO on. That's just part of the conversation. Now, if you come to the table with maybe the systems that are on, maybe that one, I'm also looking at that one.
Exactly right. Yeah.
The reaction that you're going to get is going to be significantly different than if you just knew that your opinion is sound.
Yeah, it's true. I bet you can probably get some of that in like an interview process too. I don't know what these questions are, but I assume there are smart questions you could ask the CEO when you're considering the job in the first place to make sure that there is going to be that good back and forth and good relationship.
That's right. And never discount that. Somebody is interested in you and interested in bringing you on the team for your expertise and your insight.
Yeah.
So you need to have that expertise and that insight and contribute, even if it means asking for budget to implement a system.
All right. I'm going to try to sneak in one more question, Olivia, before we get kicked off the screens here. I think we have maybe time for one more. This is the most upvoted one. It's just like, how did you handle your first position as CFO? I have not been a CFO, so I'm turning this one over to you, Olivia. People want to know.
Oh man, it's a lot of responsibility. And for me, it was actually refreshing because being the CFO gives you a level of clarity on the business that you don't get really anywhere else in the organization except for the CEO. And for me, understanding what all those pieces were and understanding what are the risks when I look forward into the future and what is everything that's going on inside the organization today that I need to consider, that was really refreshing for me. What I did not do well was I did not push back enough on the CEO. I stepped into the CFO role as a VP of finance or a director of finance might, right? Like I thought I was there to do a job, to close the books and, do
Yeah.
the financial modeling, do the fundraise. The part that took me a while to really understand is that they're looking for my opinion. They're looking
Yeah.
for my guidance. They're looking for me to spot the things around the corners that they might not necessarily see. They're looking for me to say, oh, this is our product vertical today, but have we thought about this? They're looking for me to be a second brain to theirs. And I think that's the really fun part too. And it's been really fun learning about that and growing into that role.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Olivia. Luke, I'm going to try to add one more thing before you jump in. I'm not going to let you.
Please do.
The only thing that I'll add to this, and I promise it's related to you, Luke, is like the first time you're in any role like that, get as much help as you possibly can. Throughout my career, what that help has looked like is reaching out to folks who have done the job before and picking their brain. Attending stuff like this is obviously helpful too. Joining communities, which is where we get back to like the CFO Connect community, has been huge in my career. And I think the less that you go in alone and the more you go in with a spirit of a lot of curiosity and wanting to learn from others, I think the better off you'll be in the transition.
+1 to that. Absolutely.
Well said, Phil. And it's true. When I'm talking to members, the one thing they tell me the most is it's lonely at the top and you don't have that internal advisory board to bounce ideas off each other. And that's why CFO Connect and other similar communities become such a valuable asset, because you have kind of that external advisory board to go to talk to people who've gone through the same challenges as you have and can talk through experience. Definitely well said, and definitely what we're seeing also across the board in our members. So yeah, thank you, Phil, Olivia. You guys covered a lot of grounds, a wealth of insights. We went very, very deep in lots of different topics. So thank you so much for kind of taking us through this journey. To all the audience members, thank you so much for asking lots of really interesting questions that I thought were quite well spoken and well asked. And for those of you who either couldn't catch the whole thing or want to watch the replay again, we're going to be sharing this replay via email in the coming hours after this session. We'll also have a full recap on our blog with the top questions and answers that Phil and Olivia answered as well. So keep an eye out for that. And so once again, thank you so much to Phil, Subscript, Olivia, for taking the time to come with us today and kind of share these insights. And we will see you on the next CFO Connect webinar. So have a good evening and a good morning wherever you.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.